Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Oxford Policy Podcast. Today, I'm really pleased to be joined by Oleksandra Azarkhina. Oleksandra is former Deputy Minister for Communities, Territories and Infrastructure in Ukraine. She was head of Defense Industries Initiative at the Economic Security Council of Ukraine and is now a chief specialist at Ukrainian Air Force Command. So she served Ukraine from policy making to civil service, and today we will talk about serving a country, particularly in time of war. Oleksandra, thank you very much for joining the Oxford Policy Pod.
Hello, Marc. Thank you very much for having me.
So as I mentioned, you served as Deputy Minister for Communities, Territories and Infrastructure. Could you explain to us what this portfolio covered and what were your day-to-day responsibility?
That was rather a lot. So I started my career in the Minister of Infrastructure, being head of the reforms office in there. But with the start of the full-scale invasion, it was the moment when everyone was taking the most urgent jobs. So I ended up with leading on the military logistics. So really, the full-scale invasion started for me with the organization of the military logistics from Poland to make sure that all the weapons coming from the partner nations are safely coming to Ukraine and as fast as possible. But in addition to that, I was doing projects regarding the protection of the critical nation infrastructure. I was leading efforts in keeping the decentralization reform going, the regional policy, looking for the digitalization in the process of the restoration, making sure that the restoration, recovery of Ukraine is transparent and accountable. So, frankly speaking, it was rather, you know, a portfolio with the various dimensions.
And you become a minister in time of war in July 2022. There was imminent existential threats for Ukraine. How did you deal with this pressure?
I mean, it's still here. We're still under the existential threats. It's just the fact that we have adapted. Back then, I think we all had not just sense of urgency, but it also felt like a wings behind your back. It really felt that you have the ultimate motivation, and whatever you're doing right now, it's meaningful. It's meaningful just to make sure that you survive, your country survive, and that's like maybe I sound a bit too romantic, but that was the most important thing. In addition, of course, it's from the point of view of the society, it's all about the cohesion, it's all about the trust, and wherever you go back then and even now in this time of war, you can really build the things if you have this trust inside it. So being not as abstract as I was, I can say that back then it was necessary to organize the work around the defense efforts, but also to act even as a civilian in a way to prioritize the defense. And it worked well when we have this nationwide approach, when there's no, division between the business, civil society, army, or the government. It really should act as one. And I think that was the key reason why we, survived.
You led some reform also to build more trust in the Ukrainian society with the digital, for instance, reform. Can you explain to us those reforms?
Yeah, digitalization is quite an important part of all the transformation in Ukraine during the last 10 years. It's very important to underline that the digitalization in Ukrainian case was successful not just because we are good in IT technologies in general, but because we were approaching digitalization as a process of transforming existing procedures, existing institutions. So it's not just digitalize what you already have. It's just really the approach when you're rethinking and transforming the existing systems. So, and it started quite long time ago. It was really the Euromaidan revolution which pushed the country for the change, and why we had this leapfrog opportunities in comparison with majority of the European countries, in where to push the digital project way harder because you have already structured institutions, already structured procedures, and to push something super innovative, it's just hard. I know that. So in our case, having nothing, having really old, corrupted, non-efficient structures, it was really good to push some incredible and new stuff. So I really started with a 10 years old story because the products I was working on, they're really very cool. I'm very proud of them, but they are based on the existing digital ecosystem. So the project I've built with my team, it's called dream.go.ua. So like, yeah, it's an acronym basically. It's about the digitalization and the restoration and the ecosystem. That was the main, like, yeah, accountable and so accountable management. The idea was that we need to create something which will allow us to have proper transparency and accountability on the whole cycle of the reconstruction process. And we did it. So at this stage, we already have in the system all the restoration projects online, and you can follow them and analyze them, not just on the process of the construction already, but from the moment when someone decided that this project should exist. So there is some problem need to be fixed. And for example, the problem is I need to educate children in my community. And you can solve it by buying some buses and bringing children to the neighborhood community, or by repairing or by constructing new school and so on. So it's really, approach which is the smartest. We were following the best practices of the World Bank. We were actually doing a lot with our UK partners by learning their 5P project approach. But it's in the core, it was really just the desire to make sure that we digitalize as much as possible, that we are bringing not just some part of the infrastructure project, but the whole cycle, and really seeing it through the lenses of the important things for the society, for the people. And yeah, so you like whoever listening to us, I highly recommend you to look into the dream.go.ua. I hope you're going to be surprised by the level of the details and the level of the transparency you can get in there.
This is fascinating. And can you tell us more about why transparency was so important in the Ukrainian context to build also accountability for international partners and for the citizens also in Ukraine looking at the government?
I do believe transparency meaningful in any societies. It's just like, this necessary light which destroys whatever is hiding behind the shadows. And really, even the most developed societies do need it. Beyond that, beyond the transparency, of course, we need working institutions, we need working courts, we need independent media to make sure that the whole, system is operational. In Ukrainian case, we in many, like there are lots of examples where we can say that accountability and transparency, supported by independent media and the strong civil society, were somehow even replacing the lack of the reformed courts or anti-corruption system. And it was just because as a society we are strong and we can push, whoever on the power to do the right things just by the knowledge. That was our way out. But systematically, obviously, in addition to the transparency, you need institutions. And that's something what we are focusing to work on. Even during the wartime, there's a consensus in the society that we do need strong anti-corruption institution, for example. So really going beyond that. But I have funny story. Like once I was talking with a BBC journalist, and he was saying like, yeah, okay, you have this beautiful dream system. You can follow all the restoration project. So I followed the system, and I found in Zaporizhia region that there is a set of the projects which are definitely having corruption there. Look, the prices are higher than the market prices. I said, yeah, and you can see it online. You can track and actually influence it. While in UK, it was back then when it was scandal around the COVID finances. I was saying, and you discover that there are some, problems and fraud in the COVID procurement 2 years after COVID ended. In Ukraine, you can do it online and make the difference really
Insane.
faster. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Another very cool project and very important for Ukraine defense is the logistic hub that you also worked for in Poland, coordinating international military assistance. Can you explain to us about this logistic hub that you worked for?
Oh yeah. So it's I wasn't alone there, obviously. In the end, I ended up with an incredible team which consisted of us as a Ministry of Infrastructure, my colleagues and friends from the MOD General Staff, and Ukrainian Association of the Truck Drivers. They, as a real civil society, became a cornerstone of it. So imagine it started for us on the 28th of the February, so like a fourth day of the full-scale invasion, I got a call from my boss, who was back then with Zelensky in a bunker, and he told me, Alexandra, you need to go to the border and fix the problem with the weapons wherever. Like I said, okay, wherever I'm doing that, you go to task. It's a wartime. You were saying like, of course I'll do that. So I've arrived to the airport in Poland. I lived in the airport for 3 months. Like the first day is literally in a cargo terminal, and in the beginning, our job was just to register what's incoming flights are and what's inside, because no one knew, the infrastructure for all the communications were rather disrupted, and no one knew what is happening. And I knew that my job is to make sure that the front line gets what's needed as soon as possible. And I've just organized the work in there in a hub to make sure that everyone are focused on the main job, to bring the weapons to the front line. And that's how we started to work with Ukrainian Association of the Truck Drivers. First months, they were doing their job totally for free. The first payments for the gas, I was paying even myself. Then it was Polish government who gave the money for the fuel. Then we organized a system using this association of the truck drivers, where Ukrainian businesses volunteered and donated money for this association so they can do the job. For 2 years, it was on the Ukrainian business shoulders, Ukrainian Association of the Truck Drivers, to lead all the efforts around the bringing the weapons inside Ukraine. It cost nothing for Ukrainian budget, and it cost almost 1 million euros per month for Ukrainian business. And it was meaningful. It is, and it was it was super accountable. Like it was the system which we built together in this, civilian domain, but to provide the security, we had the convoys over. So it was like a physically, because sometimes when people hear the story, they think, oh, but how are they providing security? I can tell you, this distributed, decentralized system. On one hand, it wasn't possible to destroy it by Russians because it's not the way they're thinking, the hierarchies they're building. So it was already super stable because of that. But from the point of view of the security of the deliveries of the weapons, so each of them car, they had a convoy. So Ukrainian special services, they were organizing the flow of these trucks. And if you're the truck, even civilian one, volunteered one, but bringing the weapons, you were part of this, like a security system. So it's national police, Ukrainian security policies, and that's how it was all organized to the Ukrainian logistic forces. After that, it was logistic forces who were delivering, beyond, but this important part was really civilian led, and it was like that for 2 years. After that, we gave the work to the institution, to the MOD.
Yeah, we really need to shout out to all the drivers, the society, the civil society who made this huge effort. Obviously, international partners were also important in this coordination. Poland as almost a frontline country because of the coordination of this logistics. Other international partners, how would you assess the support at that time from European countries?
It was incredible. I mean, it was, like I remember the days just before the full-scale invasion and first days when all the major embassies left Kiev, and we really felt abandoned. And that was sick. It was very, very hard. And in the moment I arrived to Rzeszów, the moment we started to get this weapon, that was the psychological shift. That was the understanding we are not alone. So like if we survive those 3 days, we'll survive, whatever it's needed. And it was also very important that back then people weren't so focused on the bureaucracy. They weren't so focused on the formalities. They were just really led by common sense. I know it's hard, to have stable institutions led by common sense only, but it's something what we're lacking now in well-established democracies. And it was so meaningful to do things, to move fast, and I do believe that what saved us, and especially yes, Poland. We do have complicated issues now in international politics with them. I do believe it's financed by Russian propaganda as well. This emotional ties in the historical past. I don't know how far your listeners are following these topics, but there are some like historical discussions now happening on the very high political level. But again, as a nation, Poland really saved us and saved just, innocent lives, but also the logistics. And we're super grateful.
The war has been going on for more than 4 years now, since Russia's full-scale invasion in Ukraine. You served as deputy minister, then you had different roles, now in civil service. How did your understanding of the war evolve, or how did you see the war evolving in those 4 years until now?
Even my personal story can be an illustration of how I see it. So, being part of the reforms office in the Ministry of Infrastructure, I became part of the efforts around the military logistics. So that was how whole society was militarized, not willingly. No one really wanted to deal anyway, with the weapons. I hated it. I really wanted to do environmental protection instead. But that's what I'm, supposed to do because otherwise we the Russians will occupy us, and we know too well what Russian occupation means. The war started for my family in 2014, as I'm from Crimea, and my parents left Peninsula after the occupation. So that's stage one. Like the militarization, which you never asked but became part of your life. Then, yes, I had this period working for the civil society, for the work like consultancy, doing a lot for Ukrainian defense industry. And yes, Ukrainian defense industry became source of our sovereignty, source of our, let's say, using the Trump language cards in our pockets, and we're very proud of it. And it's also very civilian led. It's very agile. It's very digital led. That's why it's so incredible, and it's also very, again, the same as example we had with our logistical hub. The just the borders between the military, business, civil society, they're so blurred in Ukrainian defense industry. Actually, it's everyone working together, and it's never invention only of one company. It's always the product of the nation if it's a real stuff, because it's the product never ends with just a company just building it. It ends on a front line, being constantly tested, constantly upgraded. And so, speaking further about my own transformation, I do believe that's now at the moment when the whole society need to mobilize to finish the enemy, and that's why I've decided to join the Air Force. Luckily for me, I've joined it as a civilian servant, so it's a bit easier than to go to the army with a, much more obligation. So it's easier for me. But still, I feel better now when I'm serving in the Air Force because that's the ultimate type of work. That's the type of work which is the most important now, because at this stage of war we have a second front line over our heads. The first front line, the line between the fighting forces, is stable. Yes, we are fighting for this village, that's our village, but it's still stable. There's a huge kill zone, everything, but stable. In the same time, the only way for us to lose now, if we will lose the sky, because we still have a lot of challenges with the ballistics missiles. There's still huge necessity of the Patriot missiles, and yes, Russian production capacity of the cruise missiles, of the ballistic missiles, is too bad. They're too good at that, unfortunately. And I do believe we're going to minimize the Shahid threats. That's a part of my work now. That's my responsibilities. But again, I do believe that we need not underestimate this fight in the sky.
Can you touch a little bit more on this small air command defense and how the shed type drones changed the dynamic of the war?
That's a huge game changer. So the first Shahids come to Ukraine in October 2022, so rather early. But since then, they evolved several times, not several times, a constantly evolving platform. That's exactly how we define them. That's a platform which is being developed by different, Russian institutions into various directions. And the numbers of the Shahid attacks per year, so the last calculations I did, it was from the March 25 to the March 26. It was 46,000 Shahid attacks per this, for a year. It's a lot. And they're gonna attack us more, and we see the constant growth till the end of the year. Luckily, our attacks on their energy infrastructure has influence on the Shahid's attacks as well, because they also need fuel. That's a good news. But in general, like it's they're growing, and they would rather make their citizens suffer without the fuel, but find a fuel for the killing machines they're building. In addition to that, they're very good in building technical upgrades of the Shaheeds. They now can fly much faster. They're so-called like a jet-propelled Shaheeds. They can also build the different manures, like AI-led manures. When they see that they're gonna be intercepted, they do this. I forgot the English wording for that. Um, so they can avoid the attack. They also arming them sometimes with the FPV drones, sometimes with the guns, and it's really nasty. It's nasty because they're long distance platforms as well, and we are urged to constantly upgrade our products as well. They're
What's
rather
your
good.
strategy to minimize the threats of these shared drones?
So now it's a main thing. Like we finally found a cost efficient solution. It's Ukrainian interceptor drones, like a drone against drones. That's the most logical answer. And what we're building now, we're focusing on the strengthening the echelon type protection. So the echelon type protection is basically we are strengthening the radar field because to enable our interceptor drones, we do need a radar field. We're looking for the solutions where interceptor drones can have a radar itself, but it's technologically challenging. And with this density, we are building the system, remotely controlled system as well, which allows us to control different assets we have in when the ord is coming. Because now we have a lot of these interceptor drones, but when they're attacking them with 90, passing through one point, it's very hard to intercept them all. It's just the mass what's pushing through our protection. So that's why we also need the density. So that's very basic answer, not to relieve too much
Yeah.
state secrets.
And one of the main reasons for tackling this issue of small air command is also protecting critical infrastructures in Ukraine. Can you explain why is it so important to protect those infrastructures?
Oh, that's exactly the thing which I really love to talk about because again, coming from the infrastructure, now working in this air defense CRS command, I'm joking that I still working for the infrastructure because the main goal is to protect our critical infrastructure because that's the source of economical resilience. That's the only reason why people can stay in the country and live in the country and build their businesses and so on when the economy is working and the cities are livable. So that's why is the top priority. And obviously we've seen this winter how hard it was to keep living during the attacks on the energy infrastructure. We do believe they're gonna repeat it this winter as well. Yes, of course, we are much more not just focused on the air defense, but also we are working on the passive defense, on distributed energy generation. I can talk hours about that, but answering on short, um, without keeping our infrastructure working, we you know we cannot we cannot win because it's always the war of logistics. And again, we're in this stage of war when it's logistics, infrastructure, resilience. And it's good that now we're playing both sides. And I know that in autumn, Russia will suffer even more from Ukrainian attacks, not only by the drones, but by our cruise missiles.
And one of your other roles that we haven't talked about was head of defense industries initiatives at the Economic Security Council of Ukraine. So in this role, if I understand well, you were in charge of attracting more investments for the DevTech. How did you manage to attract those investments? What reforms were needed?
So in Ukrainian Economic Security Council, I was focusing not only on the attraction of the investments, because everyone was doing that. I was focused on the things which are more challenging, is how to create a good investment climate in Ukraine, which is way harder. And the problem is we still have a lot of challenges on our side in providing better conditions for the investors to work with the Ukrainian defense industry. I would rather say we have hostile investment environment. The only thing which keeps people to look into Ukrainian defense market, it's obviously the innovation. It's the only defense market which actually matters. It's the only defense market, except for Russia, which is connected to the reality, to the new reality of the fight. So that's why we're doing that. But there are so much boring, not sexy questions which no one wanted to do, and I'm quite proud of my team that we were focusing on that. Like questions of the intellectual property, or the questions of the export regulations, or the questions of the way we can build the R&D together and actually thinking ahead of the better type of the contracting. So those things are not as interesting for majority as just, oh, that's Ukrainian innovation. Let's, have it here to protect the Europe. It's boring, time-consuming projects, but super important. And it's part of the NATO integration, EU integration, and just the whole process of living and talking to each other in the same language. It's getting better.
Mhm.
There are several reforms which were pushed, connected to the export as well, IP, but there's still too much to do. And till now, there's very little amount of the projects between Ukrainian and Western companies which can be practically scale up. Still very challenging, but they do exist.
An important issue was is still compliance, I think, with also
Right.
EU norms, Ukrainian norms. So how do you balance the need between innovation, but also complying to some rules that can be a bit
Too much.
slowing, yeah, the process of innovation?
Yeah, that's super fair. I've organized the conference for Ukrainian defense industry and some of the European partners on the compliance in defense sector in the beginning of this year. That was a harsh discussion because we were all, exactly between this understanding. Okay, we need to apply some rules and to be civilized and to be good partners because we do want to be a good partner. But in the same time, the reality of the war are different. So it's hard. It just there are no, easy answers on that, but it's also possible. And there's a lot of engagement from the partner nations. I could say that Denmark, Sweden, UK are doing rather well in trying to build, partnership with Ukrainian companies. On US side, I could compliment the private equity firms. They are much better than anyone else in bringing the capital to Ukrainian market. Um, Not so many, private investment happening from European side yet. So it's hard, but it's doable.
And also, I think there is the role of some multilateral development bank, EBRD, probably World Bank, that were crucial in keeping the investments in infrastructures, for instance, in Ukraine.
You know, now Ukrainian defense companies, they having two challenges, two main challenges, and the ceilings they reached. It's technological ceiling. There is a need to have more of European high-tech technologies added to the innovations and simplicity we have. But B, it's lack of the finances. So you really targeted well with your question. They do need access to their finances. They don't have much of the banking resources now. And it's still very raw. So there are some Ukrainian banks initiatives, but they're super expensive. I saw some very good initiatives coming from the Deutsche Bank. So they are eager to do some risky investment, and that's very inspiring. Not much now on the EBRD, and we are looking into this Defense Development Bank, the one which was established recently in UK as well. We hope that it will be the reality, but for now, they're still in establishing, let's say.
For the last part of our interview, I wanted to touch on the lessons that we can get from the resilience of Ukraine. So, what do you think should Europeans take away in the way to organize the logistics to prepare for a potential militarized conflicts?
So that might sound not nice, but that's the reality. There is a necessity to allow actors in your system to take the decisions and take the responsibility on the place straight away. Like it's at this stage when you're in the moment of the crisis, there should be the freedom of doing not as it's written in the procedures or the laws, There should be this freedom to take the decision, to take the responsibility, even if it's against the rules. That's, I mean, I know that it's hard to consume if you're part of the European, political process and so on, but that's when it comes to the survival. That's it.
Mhm. Yeah, the circumstances justified probably the toughest decisions. Um, I have two more questions. I wanted to ask about your personal career in policy making, civil service. So after your role as deputy minister, you decided to continue with head of initiatives at the Economic Security Council, and now you're back in civil service in the Air Force Commands. And when you talk to people, many person probably after being a minister, they would retire or they would do something different. What motivated you to stay in the civil service to serve the people at probably more low key role because you are now in the civil system, civil service.
So in general, Ukrainian government is very young, and that's something to do with a Euromaidan revolution in 2014, when there was a first wave of the people motivated to change something in the country come into the government. And B, it was Volodymyr Zelensky decision. He was super open to bring, as much as possible of the youth, the ones which were ready, to take up the decision. So yeah, I'm 35 now, the same age as our Minister of Defense. Like we are both the same age as Ukrainian independence, like the modern independence. And it's just, I mean, I cannot imagine how you can go to retire if you're 45. So we are in a different political concept, first of all. But I've seen how some of my former colleagues, they really suffered after being in a very top position when you actually have a lot of the power. And then you again, just a civil society activist. That hurts because it's really what I love about being in the policy making process is this creativity. It's when you have ideas, when you have team, and you actually can make a change. That's incredible. That's really cool, and that's why, like, I of course considering to coming back to the policies. But the beauty of Ukrainian society that you can do the same even being out of the government. You can do it from the civil society. You can do it from the business point of view, and you can make a change. You can do it in the army, I'm doing now. So it just exactly what's unique about Ukraine. You actually, in this terrible situation, when the institutions are crumbling, when we are being under attack, but you have so much of this, strength from the people point of view that you can actually make a change and make things different. And you know how exactly, what I'm doing now in the Air Force influence the fact that I'm gonna have less of the shahid in my beautiful city where my son lives. That's it.
Would you have one advice for maybe students in public policy that are listening for future policymakers to make this change?
Be creative, uh, be free, take the responsibility. Um, don't focus on the process, focus on the result. Be brave. Don't, don't think that life is short, and just audacity and braveness matters, because that's what worries me a lot about the situation in the modern democracies. And the majority, we are toothless. That's a problem. That's how, the autocrats, populists are taking over because they just more charismatic, because they're more interesting. At least they're proposing something, not just, the same, when the good and nice value driven European Democrats just repeating things about the values or the things which matters, they actually forgetting in the core what they about. Ukrainian case, it's just a bloody reminder what we're fighting for. That's it. Be brave.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. This has been a super insightful discussion. Um, I'm sure it will be very useful for all our listeners to understand better how the defense is coordinated in Ukraine. You've been a very inspiring guest, and you, I think, voiced very well also um, the the resilience and the strength of the Ukrainian people uh, who made um, the defense possible and the survival of Ukraine for these 4 years. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I hope everyone really enjoyed. We invite everyone to subscribe to our channel, the Oxford Policy Pod, and we look forward for the next episodes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.